Mike Moore Media.
I've called my friend Debbie Moose in Raleigh, food writer, cookbook author. She's on the line. Hey, Debbie, welcome back.
Hello. How are you?
I am doing great. We have our monthly visit to talk about food things. And today, it looks like one-word topic, maybe squash.
Yes, because, we're into the heart of fall now, and you might go to the farmer's market or the grocery store and see these things that look kind of like squat little baseball bats.
Mm-hmm.
And you might wonder how you're supposed to deal with those. Butternut squash and acorn that looks like a giant green acorn.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, spaghetti squash, big yellow thing about the size of a football.
Right.
And then if you're really lucky, you might see some kabocha squash. Now, they are shaped kind of like a turban, and they're about as big as a turban.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really pretty. They have like orange and green stripes on the skin and everything. And they're really kabocha is really popular, actually, in Asian cooking. And I know a lot of people, I did at first, look at this and how in the heck am I supposed to get into that?
So this is not just for decoration only. We can actually eat these things.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
These are edible. These are not those bumpy little colorful gourd things that you pile up in a basket on your dining table.
Yeah, okay.
These are things that you would eat.
Okay.
And, I don't know, have you ever had butternut squash?
I have had that, and it's delicious.
It is, but it may, people may look at that the way that, the Ocean's 11 guys looked at trying to break into a safe. How do I get into this?
Yeah. Okay. So some tips of how to get into big hard squash today. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
How to crack the big hard squash.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sounds like a plan. Let's do it. Let's get in that.
And it really is worth it because it is delicious. The butternut squash are the ones that have kind of a peachy tan color skin, and they're generally shaped as like a big bulbous part at one end and a more narrow part at the other. The acorn squashes are green, and they look like a giant acorn. They're ribbed around the outside. And spaghetti squash is big yellow. It doesn't have any ribs on it. And those are the ones you'll generally see. Butternut squash, the flesh, when you get into it, is this beautiful kind of gold peach color. And it's firm. It's about the same texture as if you cut up a raw sweet potato. It's a similar texture to that before you cook it. Acorn squash is a little softer, and kabocha is a little bit softer. But butternut is just a great squash to work with. How have you had it when you've had it? How's it been prepared?
Well, I don't remember. It's been a while ago, and someone else did it. We didn't do it here, but I remember. I remember at the time someone saying, "Well, this is delicious butternut squash," but it's been years ago, honestly.
Well, you can. It's really good for soup. You see a lot of soups made with it. I've done a soup with it before with maybe a little sweet potato in there too. Mm-hmm. It's good for casseroles, or just cut it open in half, scoop the seeds out, put a little butter on it, and bake it in the oven just like that. There's really a lot, salads, casseroles, there's really a lot you can do with it. You just have to get into it.
Okay.
Without losing any fingers.
All right. Well, that's very important. Yeah, and
I prefer to keep all my fingers.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. I'm thinking it may have been in a casserole, as I best remember. So, how do we get into this hard squash?
Well, if it's not a huge one, and if you have sufficient hand and arm, if you don't have an issue with hand strength. Like with opening jars or anything. Mm-hmm. If it's not very big, you can easily do it on a cutting board. Now, it needs to be a very stable cutting board. Put a damp towel underneath it so it's not going to slide around. You might even want to try to shave a little bitty bit off of one side so that it will sit flat and not roll around. Then you just make sure your chef knife is good and sharp, nice big chef knife, good and sharp, and just go into it long ways if you intend to prepare it that way. if you're going to cut it up for soup anyway, I usually just go for the narrowest portion if I'm just going to chop it up. And then there'll be some seeds in there. Scoop those out, kind of like pumpkin. It looks like pumpkin stuff, with little, thready things and seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll need to, if you're going to chop it up, you'll need to peel it. And you can just use a vegetable peeler for that. And then cut it up. Now, if it's larger or if it's particularly hard or you have, don't have a lot of hand strength or some issues with that. I did find out there is a way, I'd heard about this, that there's a way to sort of soften it up in the microwave.
Mm.
And that works for, spaghetti squash, butternut. You take the squash and score, take a sharp knife and score it about 1/4 of an inch wherever you think you're ultimately going to want to cut it open,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's long way, whatever. And then this is really important. Be sure to prick it all over with a fork like you do when you bake a potato.
Okay.
Because otherwise, the steam will build up and it might explode in your microwave, and that's really kind of a mess.
That's not a pretty sight.
No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So then you just sit the squash in a baking dish, put it in the microwave. If it's a fairly good-sized squash, microwave it for 5 minutes. You just want to soften it enough to cut into it, not really cook it. If you're concerned that might be too long, start off with 3 minutes and then see how that feels when you pull it out. And then once that time is over, you may need to use an oven mitt. It may get a little warm to take the squash out. And then where you scored it on that cut line, it should open a whole lot easier. You should be able to put your knife along that scored line and cut it open much easier than without having softened it up in the microwave.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great.
Because I know some people have, hand strength issues. I'm getting to that point where I have a little trouble. I have to hand the pickle jar to my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honey. And then you have wonderful, wonderful butternut squash goodness to do all kinds of things with.
Oh, that sounds great. Now, you mentioned several ways to prepare that. So, what would be your favorite?
Well, this time of year in the fall, there's a casserole that I make a lot, and it really kind of tastes like fall to me because it puts a lot of these fall vegetables in there. It uses butternut squash cut into cubes. Sometimes I throw in some sweet potato, peeled and cut into cubes. Usually it's, for one of those big 9x5, 9x11, the big baking dish.
Yeah.
Maybe four or 5 cups of those. And then I usually put in 1 chopped apple, mix that into it. And the base is barley, pearl barley, and a wild rice blend. It's you can buy it in grocery stores. There's several different brands, but it's a combination of brown rice and wild rice.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And you mix that all up, saute a couple of cups of onion and mushrooms, mix that in there. And if you want it, I've used this as a vegetarian main meal by mixing drained black beans into it.
Okay.
And if you would rather not do that, keep it as a side dish, you can omit the black beans. And then this is what I think really makes it. Instead of, you have to put some liquid in there to cook all that rice and the barley, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead of water, I use like half apple cider and half water, or a combination of apple cider and chicken broth, if I don't need it to be vegetarian.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that apple and that apple cider, it's not a huge amount of sweetness, but it just adds that little bit of flavor to it. Then I'll usually shake put a little thyme, dried thyme on it, maybe a teaspoon of thyme, and of course salt and pepper, and then seal it up real good with foil. You want it tight so the grains will cook. And then bake it in the oven, usually about 375. It usually takes about an hour to bake that. And it's really flexible. If you don't want to put the apple in, you can omit the apple. If you would rather do all sweet potato instead of any butternut squash, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I do suggest definitely use the apple cider as part of the liquid because that really adds some good flavor. I have occasionally used apple juice instead if I can't find cider, but that is a lot sweeter. So, I mean, you can do that, but just be aware it's going to be sweeter.
Yeah, okay. Well, it sounds like a versatile dish, and it sounds delicious. A taste of fall for sure.
It really is, and it's hearty. Even if you keep it vegetarian or without the chicken broth, it'd actually be vegan. It still is satisfying because you've got the black beans in there, and you've got all those grains, and you've got the squash and everything. So, of course, now too, if you really don't want to cut into a butternut squash, you can buy butternut squash already cut into cubes in the grocery store in the produce section. You can buy that.
Mm-hmm. But that's no fun.
Yeah, that's no fun. Where's the challenge in that?
Sure.
You know, and also you're going to pay a little more for that, and it's not going to be as fresh. You know, it may be a little mushy.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's your choice. You know, convenience is hard to beat, but if you'll give it a try sometime, I think you'll find it manageable. Now, if we're talking about acorn squash, the way I like to cook that is just cut it open, and I generally don't find it as hard to cut open as butternut.
Mm-hmm.
Scoop out the seeds, and then I usually just put some butter or olive oil or something like that in there, and I'll put some little bit of brown sugar, salt and pepper, and usually some Indian type spices, like some turmeric and maybe some garlic powder and something a little exotic and fragrant. And then just bake those halves in the oven and eat that as a side dish. That's super easy and good.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sounds good to me. All right. Well, we've got about a minute and a half remaining here. Do we need to do anything at the end here on spaghetti squash?
Well, spaghetti squash, I'm sure everybody knows that the deal with that is you cut it open and cook it in the oven, and then when you scoop out the squash, it looks like spaghetti.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's frankly not one of my favorites, but people do really love it, and if you're on a low-carb diet, it's something that, if you're avoiding pasta, it's something that's good. But that you want to scoop out the inside and then use it separately because then it'll make all the threads.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's not one of my big faves, so I don't do a lot with it.
Yeah, butternut at the top of your list. Yeah, that could be a tongue twister.
Yes, I believe we're nuts for butternut.
I think that's even a better way to say it. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I tell you.
And apple with the butternut is just such a great combination.
It sounds like it would be.
Even if you did that in a soup, it'd be a wonderful combination in a soup.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've given us some good tips as usual, and I appreciate. We all appreciate it. Thank you for sharing those there in the Debbie Moose kitchen with us today. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope that it's helpful for everybody. I tell you, with the cooler weather, I've just gotten more energized about going in and cooking. I don't know about other people, but in the heat of the summer, it's like oh gosh, just let me have a sandwich.
Yeah.
But I've gotten sort of fired up about trying some new things and bringing out some old favorites, and I hope everybody else does too.
Now's the time.
What you're cooking next time, Mike.
Now's the time. I've got a recipe I want to try actually soon. You've inspired me to do something. Okay,
that.
well I'll tell you that next time. All right,
okay.
Debbie, always a pleasure. Thank you. Happy.
Well, thank you so much.
Happy times in the kitchen.
It's always a treat to spend some time with you.
Same here, and we'll talk again next month.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye-bye. That's Debbie Moose in Raleigh. You can get more information about what she's up to on Facebook at Debbie Moose.